out there. And we're very happy to be a part of this country. We're very happy to have served our nation and all that kind of stuff. But it's one of those things where there's some things that we have done that are that kind of bind us together. And I thought I would go over some of that kind of stuff. So I'm going to share the screen. Keep your fingers crossed. I know how to do this. But let's see here. Here we go. And so I'm going to throw that out there like this. And Veterans Day from a veteran's perspective. No, I'm not going to read it all to you, but at least I'll get you going. And if you look, it includes a space command. That's a new thing that has been established in the past few years. So we're throwing that out there too. When you get down to veterans, you ask the question, well, who are the veterans? Well, you know what? We're everywhere. We're just like everybody else. We're running around trying to get a job done. We've done our time and we've got jobs, or we have done our time, retired, and done other things. But the only difference between anybody else and a veteran is we chose to spend a portion of our lives serving our country. And sometimes it's, we felt like it was kind of a duty. I know from my standpoint, I felt like I always needed to join the service, and so that's what I did. I had planned this even before I went into college. Some people do it that way, some people don't, but almost all of us have a feeling, unless a judge ordered you to go, almost all of us have a feeling that we wanted to serve and we wanted to do a part. And by serving, we shared experiences, and the experience we shared are different from what happens with people at home. One of the things I found out, for example, when I came back from deployments, or when I went back to visit people in my hometown, they had no way to really understand the kinds of things that I had done, and all that. They had their lives, and that's what they could relate to. They couldn't necessarily relate. But for other veterans, we start talking about certain things. Oh yeah, we're buddies. We're here. We've done it, and it's a bond that makes us a little bit different, and it's kind of nice. So, for example, we know what cramped spaces are like for living quarters, and you had your Army. Now it's not the same now, but gives you an idea. But the Navy had it too. If you look over there to the left, you see that's what it was like. Those were racks, and the one on the right, believe it or not, those are coffin lockers. And you can see where it got the name. So, we had something we could kind of share that way. We're a little bit different. Then you had to go to the bathroom. You had the Army on the left and you had the Navy on the right. Doesn't look too far different, except there's a lot more steel than the one on the right. The facilities, you got to watch out, if you can see it, for the red seat. That's the Navy side. Anybody got an idea of what the red seat was? Doctors might. In World War II, if you had a venereal disease, you sat on the red seat and nobody else sat on that seat. So I was just lucky. I happened to see this and I took the picture of the red seat. So just so you know. Of course, even the Air Force had to have places to go. We had to throw off on the Air Force a little bit here. That was actually taking World War II beside a runway. So anyway, sometimes there were hazards. And then, sometimes you just had to figure it out. Can anybody figure out what that one is? You can unmute and jump in. That is the toilet on a submarine. And if you look at the instructions, flapper valve A is closed, make sure gate valve C and discharge pipe line is open, valve D and water supplies line is open, then open valve E next to the bowl to admit necessarily water, close valve D and E. And then after using, you have all these other things you had to do. So, hopefully you don't have to go real bad when you first go in there. You never make it out alive. And if you get any of them wrong, you end up wearing whatever was there. So, tell me that military people don't have it a little bit different. Then there was the housing. It involved metal. Back in the day, it was a Quonset hut. For us in the Navy, it's a big floating piece of steel. And then there was the food. Army folks, particularly back in World War II, there it was. That's the ration, and it was designed to be eaten quick on the road and fill you up because you never knew. Now you look at now today, it's a little bit different. Yeah, you've got a mess hall and all that kind of stuff. Navy had it too. The Army chow, you look up there, and sometimes they leave it plastic on. It makes it taste better. And sometimes they don't leave it on, and they'll just kind of look at it and say, no, not me. But you know what? That's okay. We got served in the mess line. We always have gotten pretty much served in the mess line, particularly if that involves in getting something alcoholic. So there you go. That's the Royal Navy, but that's okay. If they put that on an American ship, we'd have the same kind of line. And of course, we do have some food in common. And, I bet you some of you know what that is. Anybody got an idea?
Oh.
SOS.
Crap on a
SOS.
shingle.
That's it. That's it. SOS, our favorite food. God. And then you had the marching. That's something everybody had to do. And even the Navy marched while I was on my last ship. We actually had a group that marched in a parade in France when we were there. This small town wanted to do. So we had to be ready to do kind of things like that. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things the military type people had in common. And so but the other thing that was really special for us, we did things that were kind of dangerous. And it went everywhere. We had to shoot guns, jump out of helicopters, go over in Iraq and Iran and all that kind of stuff, and do things like that. And we used dangerous equipment, from tanks and missiles to bullets. And I'm sure a few of you have seen a bullet that big. But, we also had dangerous situations, like that guy that got caught after he's sitting down on the ground and a shell went off near him. So, that kind of stuff. And it may be Army guns or really big Navy guns or small Navy guns. Either way, they're a little bit dangerous, but that's part of what we were there to do. We were there to serve the nation and be ready to use those things if we had to. And you know what? Luckily, during my 20-year career, we did not have to use them. It was there, and the threat was there, but we never had to use them. That's a nice thing to say. Air Force had the same stuff. I talk about Army and Navy. Air Force trains the same way. And if you think flying an aircraft is a safe thing to do, think again. Even the Coast Guard gets out there and has to do things like, for example, look at what they're doing over there with a small boat. Interdiction, stopping people from maybe having drugs or something like that, checking things out. You don't know what you're going to be up against. So you got to give the Coast Guard a little bit of a nod too. They do their job. We even go into extremes. I will share the top ones. This is all Navy, putting out fires. I've been there on that fire line, having to put out a fire. The top one is they put you in a compartment and simulate battle damage. And yes, that's what it's going to be like at sea if you're not careful. And so they train you to do that. And as you can see by the start right down there, when they get hit, you have to do all that kind of stuff. And then sometimes it all goes wrong. And as you can see, these are not fun situations. Like I say, we train for it. We're ready. It doesn't, we can take care of it. And it's even more important at night because, we all train to do this stuff in the dark. even on a carrier. And you can imagine, take a look at this guy over here on this side. He's not very far from that flame. So I'm sure he's got a pucker factor going for him right now just to stay out of the way of it. And these guys are looking at this aircraft up here, wondering what in the world they're going to do if it swerves over their way. But that's their job, to be down there. And then you have transferring cargo at sea. Take a look. This is how we get right here. That's how we get oil. It comes from a tanker, comes across, you slam into there, and you can take on 100,000 gallons of oil. Or you can do people, this guy up here, or cargo like here. There's all kinds of things you do that are different from what anybody else is used to, even in rough weather. So you can see sometimes it gets a little hairy out there. But all veterans have some sort of tale to tell. And mine include several different kinds of ships. All these ships were ships I was on. The first one, Cochrane up here, it's a guided missile destroyer. That's the Midway. I was on board her for a little while. And these two were command ships that I was a part of. And then there was one other ship that was really close to my heart. And that's this one right here. That's USS Iowa. It's a battleship. I was so tickled to get the chance to be on something like this. And most everybody that was on there was the same way. And she was really special. I mean, take a look. You don't see some of this stuff. Ship's big. Look at the size of the bullets we shot. Now, those are the black ones. The black ones are armor-piercing rounds that weigh 2,700 pounds. And at 5 miles, that bullet can penetrate 36 feet of reinforced concrete. You take a look at down here at it's just a hatch on the bridge to get into where they actually steer the ship. But you can see that it was built to take on another battleship because that steel is 17.5 inches thick. She was born in 1943. And then she served. She was about the best everybody had for a while. She served until 1991. And we had the latest of equipment. If people look at this stuff, that airplane that's going off on there, that was how we spotted targets. And they relay back information, but they relayed back information to go to a computer. Yes, we had computers. Here it is, right here. I show this to kids all the time and talk to them about what it was like on a ship that was built was completed in 1943. That computer is something they would never, ever see again. I asked them when I first put that picture up, I asked them what it looked like. And they all say it looks like a washing machine. And yeah, keep nodding your head. Yeah, Jenny, but it's an analog computer. It weighs over a ton. And that was leading technology when it was built in 1938. So that computer, even in the 1990s, that computer was so accurate, they decided not to try to replace it with anything digital. So, and as a matter of fact, the crew went back aboard a couple of years ago. And what's interesting is we plugged it back in. It still works, even after all these years. Other things that were interesting for the latest equipment back then, that right there. Radar, when it first came out, 20 millimeter guns were pretty new. It was the latest and greatest. And again, of course, you had the big 16-inch guns. Now, I will say that, take a look at that right there. What is that? That is a bullet. So it shows you those things are huge, just huge. And to stand on that deck and see those things go off was amazing. And yeah, they're big. Now, these are the green ones. The green ones weighed 1,900 pounds. And when we shoot those, it would hit the ground and dig a hole 30 feet deep and 50 feet wide. So if you want a swimming pool, it'd have to be a round one, but if you want a swimming pool, that's the way to do it. Okay. And what's really neat, we were able to hit targets even when I was in the 1980s up to 90. We were able to hit a school bus size target 4 out of 6 times, 27 miles away. So that, you know, this is a bragging part of my thing. So let's let it go. And that's okay. You heard that, so that's good. And then when you're in your automobile at home, you probably got about 200 horsepower. Well, guess what? The Iowa had 212,000 horsepower. And I'd like to put this picture right here up, mainly because if you notice, this is us going pretty much flat out, and the stern is below the water. See the water rushing along the sides here? And that shows you what these propellers back here are doing. We had to be very careful on the Iowa because we limited our speed to 34 knots. We probably could have gone a lot faster. The problem is the shafts on that ship were there from the very beginning. They were installed in 1941. And we were scared to death we would torque off a shaft. So we had to be real careful with that. And when you stop and consider this end of the shaft where the propeller is 1.5 revolutions behind where it's coming out of the engine. So you've torqued that shaft that much. And of course, I talked about the computers and all that and all the thickest armor. We even had a bathtub. You know who it belonged to? Franklin Roosevelt, who came on board in 1943 in his trip to Casablanca. They decided Iowa was going to take the president there instead of trying to fly him. And so they put him on board. It was fun watching him try to go up a little bitty plank between his yacht and the ship, but he got on board and he stayed on for the trip over. Then he flew from there to go to his conferences, and then he flew back to the ship and we took him back home. And again, we served from 1943 all the way to 1991. We did get upgrades. If you take a look up here in the top corner right here, that instead of the airplane, now we use drones. And they send back pictures from a television camera up underneath here. And it does the same thing. We got new radio equipment like this. You know, all kinds of things to upgrade the ship. We got missiles. We got the phalanx system, which is the R2-D2 right here. But it didn't make any difference what equipment we had. It was the people who make a big ship like that run. These are some of my shipmates. And there were 1,500 of us aboard the ship when she was last decommissioned. We even hosted some famous people. As you can see, Bob Hope was on there, President Reagan, President Roosevelt, Ed Sullivan, who remembers him, you know, and stuff like that. And we did our part. And we were, you know, that was something that set us apart from a lot of people. It's hard to explain this to some people. We had great crews. We had great experiences. And I was one of them. That's my dad next to me. So veterans, all of us, have some kind of tale that we could tell if we would like to tell it. You know, that's the best part of being here right now, to be able to tell people like you and people, and particularly students who come to Samaritan House to help out there. I'll take a couple minutes and let them share. I got a big picture of the Iowa shooting a broadside in my office and things like that, and share a few things that we did when I was on board. It's something that, like I say, it sets us apart. And some of these kids have no earthly idea what can be done out there. And there's but there's one thing that the veterans would like people to understand, and there are three of these things in particular. Veterans Day, we figure, is a day of reflection. It's not a celebration. This is not a day to go get drunk, although as a sailor, you know, yeah, that happens. But it's not really that as much as it is uh, thinking about how there are some people who did serve, and thinking about um, how, the difference they may have made. It's also not a time to go to the graveyard uh, and basically say, okay, I've had my memorial service and it's done. Veterans Day is not a memorial service either. It's a day of gratitude. And a lot of people say thank you for your service and all that kind of stuff. You have to understand something. A lot of us feel like we don't necessarily need to thank you. They feel like, as one here said, I signed up, I did my job, I went home just like everybody else. And remember that inner calling I was telling you about, a sense of duty and all that kind of stuff. Uh, that's a lot of why veterans go, and recognizing that will go a whole lot better. And just, be a friend. That makes us happy. And then it's a day of careful consideration. um, Veterans, as this person said, is not a one size fits all. There are some veterans who do not want to talk about what they went through. Particularly, there's a lot of Vietnam veterans. On board the Iowa, we had an explosion in 1989, and there are a number of our vets who don't want to talk about that day. They just don't. They will talk about other parts of being on the ship, but not about that day. So recognizing the fact that they may or may not want to talk about certain things, okay, that's fine, but at least appreciating the fact that they did serve. And also, remember, some went out and did really amazing things. They've gotten medals. They may have, gotten some recognition, all that stuff. But even in my job, even when we're shooting the big guns, you got to think about the guys who are making the meals. You got to think about the guys who ran the post office, who did the laundry every day, who did the small things so the people who are pulling the triggers can get that job done. And remember, those folks are just as much a part of being a veteran as the guys who win all the medals and get, and all that kind of good stuff. So make it a day of reflection, gratitude for people, yeah, that went out and doing that. But talk to people if they're wanting to talk a little bit. And a lot of veterans, talk a little bit about what they did. Yeah, we'll do it, that kind of thing. But keep in mind that maybe some that don't want to necessarily talk, but appreciate your kind words and things like that. And one more thing, veterans want people to remember the sacrifices made for our country. We saw people, I know I saw my shipmates die. There were 47 people who died on April 19th, 1989. I knew them. They didn't ask for it or anything like it's something that happened. It was an accident. But I don't ever want to think that they didn't make the sacrifice. They were there. They were doing their job. And I always think about them that way, and appreciate the fact that they were there. Our veterans continue their service uh, by doing other things in the background. Um, we get together and support certain things. We work on things historic. We may just get together to rehash old times, but there are little things in the background that we do to keep things going. And that brings me back to my last ship, because when the ship was decommissioned, we worked with an organization to try to save the ship to make it a museum. And the reason we did that is because, one, it's our ship, sure, but future generations of Americans can learn from that ship. You're talking about a piece of metal that's been around almost a quarter of the history of the United States, and that gives you a good idea of what kind of history is really there. So we went in and fought with people and talked with people to see about making her a museum. And because of the veterans, Iowa is now a museum in San Pedro, California. But it's more than that, because of, we kept going. We wanted to be not just a museum, but a good museum. And the people that started working on it just kept plugging. And as a result, as of this year, she's going to become the National Museum of the Surface Navy. The naval people who were on naval ships did not have a museum. You had an aviation museum, you have submarine museum, but there was none for the Navy's surface fleet. And we're going to be that. And that was all that a bunch of old veterans can do. And I'm proud to be the president of this organization. So there you go. That's my little do. I'll stop the share now. There you go. So
excellent.
Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, go ahead, raise your hand. And can you hear me? Yeah, go ahead, David.
I more have a comment rather than a question, but I want Brad to make sure he can see that I got my USO shirt on today.
You did good.
So I know that, but I got to tell you that I have been a member. I've been a volunteer at the USO since they opened 11, 12 years now at the airport. Thanks to past member Labar Gunter who got me involved in it. But I got to tell you, I was a physical deferred when I was supposed to go to Vietnam because I grew up with asthma my whole life. So they didn't want me anywhere near that operation. But when this came along, I'm so happy to be part of the USO, and that support mechanism is really something special. And I got to tell you, it never fails to amaze me that we have these. We cater to the active and the retired military. These people come in, they're always thanking us for our service. We're the volunteers doing the USO, and they're thanking us for being the service, which is always amazing to me that these people, how excited they are to be with us, and the stories. That's the whole, like you said, the stories are the stories. We sit there and listen to stories all day long, and I'm just happy to be involved in that.
It's neat. They're all regular people.
Yes.
They're doing something different, but these are the same kind of guys who would meet you on the street and help you out, that kind of thing.
It's a very rewarding organization. I'm very happy to be involved.
Excellent. Kevin, go ahead.
First of all, Brad, thank you. And I also wanted to say, I wanted to give a shout out to, I know Gus isn't on the call, but I think he was a member of the Corps. So I wanted to make sure we recognize him as well. But Brad, thank you very much for that. What's your feeling about, given your background, what's your feeling about compulsory service? I know a bunch of other countries do it, but what are your thoughts?
One of the hardest things, I came in 74, 75, that around in there, and we were just starting into the all volunteer type service, but there were still people in who, because of Vietnam, and all that kind of stuff, there's almost nothing worse than having somebody there who does not want to be there. Now, during a major conflict, it sometimes has to be done. But now we don't have that. Now, for a little while, another problem we ran into was that they started the all volunteer service, but there were judges. When a kid would come up before them, who would say, you know what, you need to, if you go to join the military, I'll knock off your stuff, that kind of thing. And so these kids would go join the military. And back in World War II in Korea, I'll just speak for the Navy, we had a thing called Rocks and Shoals. Rocks and Shoals was the old Navy regulations. And under Rocks and Shoals, if you were a miscreant or something like that, and you were on board a ship, the chiefs would take you up to the bosun's locker and beat the tar out of you until you all of a sudden the light shined, and and the will of God came upon you, and it just worked out better that way. But then you can't, when we went to all volunteer, you can't do that. We don't do those kinds of things anymore. So you don't need those kinds of, they've made it illegal now for a judge to do that. Great. And we're getting the people we need to fill the ships and all that kind of stuff. It's tight, but we get them because there are a lot of guys who want to go in. And the Navy now, I'll speak for the Navy, I'm sure the Army and the Air Force, everybody else is the same way. There are all kinds of programs to help you get an education that will help you you can make a living out of it. But the things that you can do and get an education and do much better in life, you can get through going to the military. There are benefits of going into the service far beyond just the duty that you might feel. And so that's something we can kind of share too. Everybody has a different reason for coming in, but the thing is, we went and we served, and we're still serving. We've got, what is it, a few 100,000 people in service right now. They're out there on those ships doing the very same things almost that we were doing, and they're answering that call.
Great. Thank you again.
And any other questions? Go ahead,
Yeah.
Michael.
Brad, I was just curious, what was your job or rank or role or what have you on the Iowa?
I retired as lieutenant commander in the Navy, and I was on the Iowa. I was the public affairs officer. I started off as a surface line officer, and so I could drive the ships and all that. And Iowa was interesting. We had a captain named Fred Musali, great guy. He really was. And one day they're doing man overboard drills on the ship. And it's the standard drills. They throw something over the side and you have to literally maneuver the ship back around so that you can pick that person up within a certain amount of time, and all that kind of stuff. Well, I'd learned on destroyers. And okay, that's fine. But once you learn, you kind of learn. And don't forget, I had 212,000 horsepower to play with. That was fun. So, I happened to be on the bridge, and the captain thought he'd be a smart aleck and say, why don't you let the PAO see what he can do on this thing? Well, I just looked and you're going to pay for that one. And so I get the thing, man overboard, starboard side, right full rudder, all engines ahead flank. Suddenly you see this froth of white coming up from behind the back end of the ship as this thing starts to move. Now the ship weighed 58,000 tons. When it starts to move, by God, it's going to move. And so I did it around. I did what they would call almost a Williamson turn to come around. I put the ship around. I got it over there. I put the engines from all ahead full to all back full, which now you see the white water coming from a different direction, and the ship starts to shudder. And when I said all stop, the little buoy they dropped to be the man overboard was exactly where they dropped it off in the first place. So, it was one of those, I just turned around, looked over at him, and I won't use his exact words, but it was, get the hell off my bridge. So, okay, we can handle that, sea stories. I got sea stories. Yeah, we can tell you. And like I say, that ship, oh my God, the things we could tell and the things we were able to do. There was never a better ship during my career. And as a veteran, I like to talk about it.
Absolutely, absolutely. A great story.
Yes,
Hey,
ma'am.
go ahead, Jenny.
Speaking of telling your stories, has your organization thought about putting some of this on video? Some of your stories?
We have. As a matter of fact, if you go aboard the Iowa today, you have a whole section from the last crew. And there's even a section from when the explosion happened, where we have gone in and talked about what happened, how we felt, and things like that. It's, there was, how it is when it first happens, people start hollering and screaming, oh, whose fault is it? Who's this? Who's that? And we in the crew kind of felt like we didn't understand how it could be a fault. We didn't see any person doing anything like that. We couldn't imagine it. And so we just waited. And eventually it did come out that was an accident. It was a fluke. And we did things then to try to make it a little bit better, a little bit safer, but that's bag ammunition. On those guns, it's not just the bullet goes in first, but then you have bags of explosive back behind it to push bullet out, the other end of the gun. And it's 6 bags. Each bag weighs 110 pounds. When the explosion happened, the bags went off before the breech was closed. And that's how it worked. But anyway.
Yikes. Excellent. Any other questions? Go ahead, Kevin.
I am sorry to be a question hog today, but this is fascinating stuff. Brad, I didn't realize you were a command officer in the Navy. And as such, did you guys ever look at, I know hot washes are everything in military and government service, where you review things that have happened in the past, to learn from those things. But how far back did you guys go? Like, for instance, did you look at what happened to the British battlecruiser, the Hood, when she went up against the Bismarck and lost, I mean, they had a catastrophic loss of life and things like that.
Well, it wasn't just us. The Navy looked at it too. The Iowa has an armored box, and the armored box, the way they design this thing, if you look at the ship, the round would have to come through, hit the top of the main deck up top. It goes through all that wood. Yes, there is wood on the ship. It's teak. It goes through that deck, but that's what sets the thing off. And you haven't even got to the armor yet. The armor is another 4 or 5 inches thick on top of that, below that. So you go through a compartment, hit that armor, it's not going to go anywhere. It's done. That was the problem with the Hood. The Hood had a position where there was no armor, and that bullet found its way at that place. And that was a design flaw that was built into the Hood. We look back when we're shooting and when we're doing things, we're looking back all the way through the history of the Iowa. And we look back into the history of battleships in general to make sure of the things that we were doing were correct and all that kind of stuff. There was a lot of that. There was quite a bit of it. Particularly, one of the things the investigators, well, not the investigators, some of the family members had said we were experimenting with the powder bags that were in there. And it wasn't really an experiment, because in World War II, they would have a reduced charge, which is 1 less powder bag. And the reason you do that is because if you have everything there and you're shooting it at a target on an island, if there's a hill in the way in the regular charge, you wouldn't hit it, because you'd hit the hill and it stops it. You use a reduced charge, it elevates the gun a little bit more, and it goes over and then down on the other side of the hill. That's what we were doing. And so, you know, you learn how to manipulate just a little bit so that you can hit that target. So, you know, you learn how to do things like that. It was interesting. We even found out that, for example, the explosion was not the first time it ever happened on American battleship. There was another one on another. It was the same turret, same everything. They just went off. And so, unfortunately, because it's a powder bag, it's literally that powder inside. It's a thing about this big. It's a pellet. It's a whole bunch of pellets in this bag with the black powder on one end. And if it goes off, the only thing holding it in is a nylon bag. So, you know, you learn from that. And that's one of the reasons now that you're not going to see battleships again. How in the world are you going to get any kind of a charge behind a bullet that big and do it like you do like on a destroyer where it's a steel case or something like that? It's just, you know, it's going to be different.
Yeah, an aircraft carrier certainly played a role in the demise of
we don't talk about
battleships.
aircraft carriers. No, wait a minute.
Excellent.
I'm talking. We're not. Yeah, the aircraft carrier, and I served for a short time on the Midway. Aircraft carrier is far more capable of inflicting damage at a much farther range than anything we ever were able to do with a gun. Now, keep in mind, 20 some odd miles is still amazing.
Yeah.
But, you know, an aircraft can do that. Your problem then becomes aircraft are expensive. So do you spend $50 million if you lose it, you know, going after a target? Or in the case of a battleship bullet, a few $1,000s, you know, because those things were cheap. It's a piece of steel with a bunch of explosive inside of it. So.
Thank you, Brad. Fascinating.
I can talk like this forever.
I know. We're aware of that. We get that sense, Brad. But one last question of Brad, and then what I was going to do is let Tom Filson and David Miller and Remus talk about anything they want to add to the conversation today. So, Brad, any last question for Brad before we open it up to Tom, Mr. Miller, and Mr. Turner, Dr. Turner? All right. Tom, come on, give us one of your favorite memories of your service, if you don't mind.
Well, I served in Vietnam. I used to kid Joe Morris. He said he also served in Vietnam. And I told him there was a world of difference. He was on a ship. He slept in a bed every night. He ate at a table every day from a plate. We slept on the ground, eating from cans. But Winston Churchill had many quotes. The one that I remember most, he said, "There's nothing quite so exhilarating as having been shot at without results."
It is character building, though.
It is.
Here. Mr. Miller?
Yes. I don't have a story like that, but I have a reflection, I guess. I didn't have the inward calling. I had an outward letter that came to me in 1964 and said, "We'd like to draft you in the Army."
Mm-hmm.
And I at the time I was really upset because I just joined Southern Bell right out of college and saw my career going that way. But I have to say that after 3 years in the military, I could have gone. I chose the officer route, went to officer school and all that. And looking back on it, it was probably, you mentioned education. I didn't get a formal education, but I got a real education. I remember reporting to, I was sent to Korea. There was not a war going on at that time, of course. But I remember reporting into a captain, and I reported him with this typical salute and said, "Lieutenant Miller reporting for service, sir." And this big sergeant stood up and said, "Lieutenant Miller, you're going to be headquarters commandant and headquarters company commander." And I said, "Yes, sir." And I turned around and walked out and said, what in the hell was that? Had no idea what that was, but I had reported to me 9 sergeant majors, the highest ranking having a non-commissioned officer, and I learned a lot from them about how to work with people, how to manage. So it was a great experience. And you mentioned compulsory. It was compulsory for me, but I'm glad I went. Had a great experience there.
Excellent. Thank you, David.
It's interesting. He talked about how the sergeant spoke to him. If he'd have been in the Navy and gone up to a chief and called him sir, the typical response was, "Don't call me sir. I know who my father is." So, you know.
Oh,
In our unit,
Excellent.
in our unit, that response.
Sorry, go ahead.
In our unit, that response would have been, "Don't call me sir. I work for a living."
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Excellent.
VA, we would have called him sir, for sure.
Excellent. Red, any memories that you would like to reflect on?
Well, you know, Clyde was with the VA 2.5, maybe 3 years. I only served for a year, and but it was in 1971, 72. So the VA, in conjunction with Walter Reed, we were seeing a lot of battlefield injuries that no one had ever seen before. What we would call maxillofacial injuries, horrible, debilitating wounds. So part of that experience was in prosthetics and how to restore missing lower jaws. And there was just a lot of experimentation, which later went into the private sector. That's one good thing about wars, is there's a lot of innovation. And so as a result, we have incredible implants now and prosthetics that you couldn't have dreamed about in 1972.
Wow.
Best thing about the experience was meeting Clyde and Barb in Washington.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, this has been a wonderful program. Thanks again, Brad. Thanks again, Tom. Thanks again, David and Rhett. Thank you again. And again, I know you said we shouldn't say it too much, but thank you for your service and thank you for all you've done for your country. We're proud to have you as our members and proud of everything you've accomplished. And now we will go ahead and have the 4-way test. So if you want to unmute yourself of the things we think, say, or do. First.
Is it the truth? Is it true?
Second.
Will it build?
Will it third?
Will it build goodwill and
Beneficial.
Fourth.
Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
And fifth.
It'll be fun.
Will it be fun?
And yes, indeed, today was a lot of fun. Thank you all.
Yes.
We've got a great program again next week. So look forward to seeing you next Friday, December 11th. We have our next social. And again,